Hey y'all, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, this is Joe and Jay Outspoken. Remember to follow all of our platforms. You can find them by going to linktree/Joe and Jay Outspoken. Today's show is for Tuesday, November 7th. I'm Jay, and today Joe and I will be discussing the second part of our I'm a Man series with our special guest, Lizzie Moon. Well, you all ready for I'm a Man too?
Man, I was born ready for this conversation, buddy. Can't wait. I'm kind of excited and intrigued, really, to see women's insight with Lizzie today. So I want to hear what she has to say.
Yep, it'd be good to get a different perspective. Well,
Hopefully she's on our
let's see
side.
how bad men suck today. All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for showing up today. We have a very special guest today, Lizzie Moon. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah,
Thanks
this
for
is going to
having
be
me in on the conversation. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely,
Thanks for being
absolutely. Yeah, we so this all worked out because we did an episode, and we'll link it somewhere that you can go back to the first part. But Lizzie sent us an email and was interested in getting in on this conversation, and we had already planned. Joe and I had already planned about doing a part 2. So
Sure
yeah,
did.
we figured this be a great thing to have, a different perspective other than just a couple dudes talking about it. So here we are. So let kick us off on part 2, Joe. What are we going to go over today?
Well, in our first episode that we had of I'm a Man Too, we talked a lot about our men's emotions and their lack of showing them, right? In fear of looking weak in a relationship. We really talked a lot about that. And I think it's important. I think it's important that we understand that we are in two very different wavelengths when it comes to men and women and emotions and feelings. I feel that, and I hate using the word toxic, but I feel that sometimes women have a toxic expectation when they want men to kind of relate to their feelings. When our feelings, we manage them very differently than a woman does. So it's kind of hard for a man to relate to how a woman's feeling, right? Because we don't relate that way. We're kind of taught from very young age to kind of ignore our feelings, right? They're just feelings. They're not nothing physical that's damaging us, right? So we think, and so we're not able to relate a lot to what women when they have their feelings. Women wear their feelings on their sleeves, and we're able to read them. Men cannot. I think one of the biggest problems that we have in divorces nowadays is communication, right? And why is that? Why do you think we lack that communication? Is because we don't know how to talk, right? We don't. Women expect us to have these conversations, these deep thought conversations, and men are kind of like, "Ah, we're good. Let's kind of move on. How was your day, honey? And then we get all that, like we talked about in the last episode. They'll talk to us about their day, about how this girl over at the water fountain was talking about so and so and blah blah blah. We're supposed to understand all these things, and we side with our better half, and we understand them, and when they ask our opinion, we kind of give them what they want to hear, but we can't relate, right? Because men don't do that. Men don't sit around
Right.
and talk like that. Men are just like, that guy's an a-hole, you know what I mean? And that's about it. So I think it's important that I think women need to understand that we just do not communicate how they do. I don't know, Lizzie, what do you think?
Well, I think you're actually speaking to what I see as more of the crux of the problem. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And your previous podcast really rang a bell because it's a conversation that I'm having in circles of women around me. So, and I like to bring that out because what I want to say is it's not all women and all men, you know, and I think that's
That's
part of
right.
the hijacking of of what we all live under, right? And that's not putting blame on any one thing. I think it comes in a lot of different ways to convince us that all men are a certain way and all women are a certain way. And then we end up living into that. We end up confirming it just by how we then behave. And then what we project onto others, meaning, my wife's emotional and I'm logical. Well, that's not always true, right? And then, I'll bring in the paradigm from which I work that really says there are many expressions of the feminine energy and many expressions of the masculine energy. And then we can put those into a man's body and a female's body. But what in a broad sense trying to say is that it's really taken away all of those different expressions of the masculine, of the feminine, and said, no, women only are this way, men are only this way. And that gives fewer outlets for all of us, women and men. However, women are more, maybe in just recent few hundred years society, I don't know, I'm not speaking of all cultures, but women are more amenable to gathering in groups and being able to talk about things, right? And men aren't as much. And so that's what struck a chord with me, is I really do see that in today's culture, as men are having a hard time. I was married for a long time, 24 years, and the man I was married to was actually not like a man's man, a manly man. He was a thin guy. He was more in touch with his feminine nature, not fitting into the beer drinking, sports, watching kind of persona that is put out. And he would often say, like when you go buy gifts for men, that's what there is, beer and sports. And
it's not a bad thing.
He's like, I don't resonate with that. Right. It's not a bad thing, but it's like what everybody gets funneled into as the only expression of the man.
Masculine.
And that's kind of what you're speaking to, and what I think too. Yeah. So that's kind of my take in general. Yeah.
So let me ask you this.
So, and the reason I emailed you, one more thing, the reason I emailed you is that I want you to know, and I want men to know, that there are women, whether it's your partners or your mates or your mothers or your sisters or whatever, but there are women who have a heart for that. And we're not saying we have the answers for it, but we do have a heart that, that there are more expressions of the masculine than you're kind of allowed or that's accepted in society. So
let me ask you this, Lizzie. How would you see a man? Now, I guess it's hard to ask because your view of men, but generalizing, how do you think a woman, a feminine woman, would see a man who is the protector, right, the head of the household, that comes home emotional, crying about their day, just total role reversal. How would you think women would take that?
Well, again, I believe that we're all living under the distortion of that, meaning women are now expecting you to only be the strong masculine and not ever have an emotion as well. So we project that onto you. Whereas I guess what I'm saying, and I hope is changing, and that's why we're having this conversation, is how can we bridge that and say, look, because I'm having an emotional response, it doesn't mean I'm a weak person rolling around on the ground all day, blubbering in my tears. It's not right. Because the science behind it really that we're hopefully discovering or getting back to is that an emotional charge, that time when I have to cry or yell or scream or whatever, that isn't accepted in general society, only lasts 90 seconds, truly, right? So can we allow that in men and women, like let it pass, it's okay, for you too. And I believe that men, a real number has been done on males, because you're not even allowed the 90 seconds, of that emotional expression. And if we were all okay with knowing it's going to pass, it's okay. He's not losing his manlyhood because he had a 90-second emotional response, and women aren't crazy because they had a 90-second rage. All of that was kind of accepted as an expression. And that's what I'm hoping to bridge that conversation is like, can we not see each other as anything? Can we not label each other as anything for having a human emotional response?
Yeah, that's a really great point because I watched this deal. Gosh, it's been years ago, and I still refer back to it. It's this guy. His name's Prince EA. I don't know if he goes by Ia or something like that, but he has this deal on labels, and it is so good because he talks about exactly what you're saying. That everything that society has created this label on top of everything and everybody, and so attitudes and like right now I don't want to go super off topic, and Joe and I don't want to even talk about this anymore, but there's a war going on in Israel and Palestine, whatever, and it has divided the country so bad. And the thing is that everybody should like not want any of it, right? But yet folks pick a side, and it's like two football teams fighting each other basically, and that's the way they think about it, sadly. And so if we could start removing those labels, it would help quite a bit. I mean, if you look at society today, what's the thing that's taught? What has created the downfall in things in society today? Well, in the classroom, they're teaching more labels than ever, right? They want to try to label everything, and yeah, men and women, it's the easiest labels to put because doesn't matter what culture you are, doesn't matter where you're born or where you're from or what language you speak or religion you are. There's men and women, right? There's 900 other. We won't even go down that road, but all these other identifiers and everything. But men and women, for society to exist, you have to have those two functions, right?
That's
And
right.
it's the easiest labels to lay on people. So yeah, that's super excellent point.
Well, and I want to speak to what Joe already said too, is that, this label of toxic, you know, and again, as a woman, I want to tell you, I don't agree, about that toxic male thing. Or and I see it among women, on their healing path and on their spirituality path, still saying, oh, men bad. We only want women's circles. We only want women around. And I'm, here to say, hey, let's stop that. We're not going to heal if we don't come together. And again, I'm not saying I know how to do that. And actually, I posed the question to you. What would that be? If there was a way to overcome these, labels of because you had an emotional response, you're toxic or
Right.
crazy or,
Right.
you know, um, so yeah, I don't know, but I'm happy to have that conversation. I don't think anybody knows, but we're willing. Kind of just reaching a hand across the aisle, kind of in a way, and saying, okay, you know, let's start changing it. How?
Right.
You know?
Correct. Yeah. So let me just throw this out to you guys. So we talked about divorce, right? One of the biggest causes of divorce is again lack of communication. 75% of divorces in the United States are lack of communication, and we already know what some of that is, right? It's these barriers that we have between men and women, and how to communicate, and how to talk, how to express ourselves, and how not to. Um, Here's another scary fact. So 70% of divorces are initiated by women, right? So let me ask you this. I think you and I talked about this, Jay, and I think Lizzie was part of that. But why do you think that women initiate that 70%? Now, I want to clarify. It's not that men don't have feelings. We do have feelings. We just choose not to express them, right? We choose to kind of keep them down, keep them, you know, hold the reins down, like they say. But I think the reason why women, I think, are more prone to initiate divorce, and I'm not saying that there's no a-hole men out there that deserve to get divorced, right? That's not the point. But at one point, they got together because they loved each other and they thought, hey, this is going to work out. We're going to get married, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, there's a lack of communication. Something happened. And then the woman, 70% of them in divorces, woman decides to initiate it. So why do you suppose that is? Well, I think it's because women are more likely to have a more robust support system than men, right? Um, Women support each other. But men, come on, let let's be honest. How do we support each other? You're going through a bad time. Let's say, Jay, you have a breakup. I have a breakup. What are we going to do? We're going to get together. We're going to have some beers, right? We're going to watch some football. We're going to watch some hot oil wrestling. Whatever you're into, whatever it is. I'm not judging.
Do they
But
still have that?
oh, all of a sudden, do they still have you? All right, I'll play into it, Jay. Yeah, I think they do. I don't know.
That's
Any-
my Amazon Prime subscription. That's all it's for.
But we don't have that support system, right? We don't. Why don't we go to our family when we're getting divorced? Because we're men, right? And we're going to look like
Right.
failures, like we failed at something. And men hate to fail, right? Men don't like
Right.
to have that label on them.
No.
And this kind of falls back into what Liz was talking about with all the labels and whatnot. Men
Yeah.
are very concerned about labels. We don't want to be called lazy. We don't want to be called emotional. We don't want to be called a failure. There's so many labels that we don't want to be tagged with. It is important. Here's something that came from I can't remember who it was from, but it's an attorney group, and they put out a list of things that what happens during a divorce. And I've highlighted some things that are very interesting that they noted on here. It says divorced men often undergo severe emotional turmoil. They may feel angry at one time and sad or depressed the next. That's one bullet point. Second one says they also suffer from regret, loneliness, disappointment, denial, and guilt. Such strong emotions often take a toll on their mental health. So again, we go back to that. We don't have a support system, right? Whether it's because we choose not to, or we just don't have one. Um, that we have to deal with all those things. We have to absorb that, right? We have to be the strong one. I mentioned this in the last podcast that about I'm a man. Is that when a woman breaks down, something happens to her, she expects her man to be there, ready to support her and say, hey, you know what? Forget your boss. He's a jerk. I don't even like him. Quit that job. We'll figure it out. I got this. I'll put in some extra time in. Don't worry about it, right? That's what the woman wants to hear. At least that's what we think they want to hear, right? And meanwhile, right? What do? We go to work the next day. We're like, damn, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be able to make up that money? Because nowadays it's a two-income household, right? It's kind of hard to just be a single person doing that. So it stresses us out. But we're not going to go back to that source of stress or significant other and say, hey, man, go get a job. I know I told you to quit, but that was a bad idea. Go get a job, right? Because, again, we get a label, right? We're not true men. We failed. We can't even support our own wife or girlfriend or whatever the case is. So my question, I want to kind of go back to what Lizzie was talking about. What does those 90 seconds look like for a man?
Yeah. If I may, the list of emotions you gave during, that men suffer during divorce, well, so do women,
Yeah.
right? Those are the same emotions we all suffer. So, but you're right. Where are you allowed to express it? That isn't just swept up like, oh, buddy, it's okay. You'll get over that,
Right.
And, frankly, we're kind of in a time where we're learning. We are learning, humanity as a whole, to just kind of allow those expressions. We don't have to fix everything, in the work that I do. It's just allow the expression of it. You don't even have to get your girlfriend a tissue, just let them cry for a minute, it'll be okay. And we need to move these things through. But, for us all to realize too, and you're using some of these words just to point out interchangeably, we do these things because we're a man, right? We don't express because we're a man. And that really subtle difference between, are we wired that way or do we choose that, And again, if we say we choose it, then there's another layer of guilt and I can't, and how am I going to get over it? But I think so. It's just such a programming that it's hard to tell anymore whether I'm wired that way or I've chosen this. I don't feel like men are necessarily choosing to not express. I think you're more in it when you're, on it when you're saying, we just don't have that place, because this has been generations
Correct.
passed down of you're
Yeah.
only supposed to act a certain way.
Yeah.
And so, and therefore women haven't been trained to accept men having an emotional response either. We think, oh my God, the house is falling down, right? You got to get it together. And we all living under some of this kind of trauma response, And so I want to bring in one more thing about what you said about, the reason people get divorced so much is because of lack of communication. And I'd like to, maybe challenge that and say maybe it's lack of understanding, because if I don't understand, then I'm only going to impose what I feel is right, meaning you should act this way, you should be that way, you should think this way. And that's what I feel like a lot of, couples do. I mean, I've done it too. I don't like the way you're acting, so you should act in a way that makes me more comfortable. That's really what it is, instead of understanding, oh, you just have a different way of thinking completely. And I'll bring in a little bit of the paradigm that I work through, because it is astrological in saying, and it relates to scripture as well, because we talk about 12 places on the wheel, and scripture talks about 12 disciples, and they have these characteristics, different characteristics, each one. That's for a reason, because there are different expressions of the human, the man, meaning all of them. And I think we've been kind of programmed into thinking, no, these are the only ways. And this paradigm says, no, what if there is a man that's actually more emotional? The Pisces man is actually more emotional. The Aries man is the protector, the warrior. There's the Capricorn man that's the elder, the wise one. There's the Libra that's very interested in relationships. There's the Sag that wants to adventure. But we don't make room for all of that. And I think what you're saying is, like, we've gotten it down to the one or two expressions, and I hope we open it up to say, no, there's this expression too, which means I should, as a wife, as a partner, both, and as a husband and as a partner, to say, oh, I understand that you're just different. You think differently, you'll behave differently, you'll handle your emotional life differently. Some aren't as expressive in their emotional life. They're more detached from emotion. Men and women both.
Right.
There are women who are very detached from their emotional life, right? Their emotions. So it's not, I'm trying to point out, it's not just a man and woman thing. And I think if we start going, oh, men can be this way and this way, women can be this way and this way, right? Then we don't box each other, and we become kind of that space where we can allow each other to express in whatever way. I don't know of any other way to start bridging the gap. I don't think there's going to be a class that we're all going to take, or a book that comes out that's going to show us how to do it. It's just understanding
Emotions 101.
Yeah, there's been those books. How's that working?
Yeah, right. There's that other
Yeah.
book with men are from Mars, women are from Venus, or something like that.
Yeah.
Which made it worse. Actually made it
John
worse.
Gray.
Yeah, and he even admits, hey, I've learned a lot more since then. So.
Oh yeah, yeah, and see, and that's a good point. That when did he write that book? Not that long ago, right? Couple decades ago at the most, right? And if you really look back at history of things, and at one time, men and women didn't get divorced. You got married, you were married, you stuck it out for life, right? Until death do us part was a real thing. And, it was disgraceful back in those days, especially for women. It was bad enough for men, but because, like you were saying earlier, Joe, like I was married at one time, and, I got married through the church. And when I got divorced, I felt this, like, the most horrific guilt and failure I'd ever felt in my life, ever. Like, I would have rather lost jobs, a limb, anything. And I just felt like such an ultimate failure in that moment in my life. So, and that, if again, you go back in time, and that's the way people did feel. They felt like the men felt like failures, and then the women couldn't get divorced because back then women couldn't, they didn't work or anything. They did stuff around the house, but they didn't get paid for it or anything like that. So they depended on the man of the house to, secure their homestead, whatever that may, whether it was a grass hut or it was a castle. You know, they relied on the man to do it. Well, as time went on, of course, that stuff is all changed, and you know, women can. I mean, shoot, if you look at college admissions and big business and stuff now, women are overtaking men in pretty much every category. So, and
And
are women
we're
happy?
talking real women, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify because you know
Yeah.
a lot of the sports are being
Not the-
overtaken by.
Not the three-legged women, just the
All right.
real women.
I had to.
So yeah, it's you know, that has really, that dynamic has changed over time, and I think one of the big, so there was a tipping point. Like, we needed to get where women were treated equally. Where men and women are not equal. Like, we can't have babies. I don't care what anybody says about anything. A guy can't have babies. They
Can you
fill you with as much stuff as they want. You're not going to have a child, right? So I'm not equal to a woman
No.
by any means. That makes a woman so much greater than
There's a reason
like 1,000.
for that.
Yeah, because we can't deal with that kind of pain.
Yeah. You're not
We're
wrong.
wusses when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? So, yeah, so over time there has been this shift, and now society has made it. So, Joe, you had asked, like, why is it? What was the number? 70% of women initiate divorces.
70%.
Because they have less to, typically, and this is not in every case, and again, kind of like Lizzie was saying, you can't talk in ultimates. Like, this doesn't go towards every single person, every single situation, but 70% of the time, this kind of works, right? So you have a society that has built it that if a woman walks away from a divorce, she usually doesn't get hit with support and all these kind of things, you know, monetarily, where men do. So it is advantageous for a guy to stay in the relationship, even if he's unhappy, to not lose all that money and stuff like that, right? So, and you would think, well, is money really worth your happiness? Well, you know, if like somebody like me, I've worked all these years to have everything I have, you know, within 2 years, to have somebody take all of that away from me, all that I've worked for my whole life. It's a deterrent for guys, you know, it's a real big deterrent for guys. So
if you spent 50 years building your empire just so a woman could be vested in 2 years.
Yeah, to take it all away.
You can't even get vested in a 401k in less time. It's ridiculous.
I'm still working for it. No, and you know, and so now here's the little caveat in all this. So 70% of women, well, what women or relationships, I should say, well, more than, and I'll have to look up the number, but it's more than 75% of the populace lives on the coasts and in very large cities. And there is a common denominator between the coasts and the very large cities. They have a doctrine that these people believe in, right? Most of the folks, and they believe in a different structure of marriage, of relationships. Most of these people have walked away from any kind of spirituality or God whatsoever. So they don't have that basis of morality, you know, in them. I mean, where all the riots and everything at? They're in all these cities, and if you look at the divorce rates in those exact same cities, it's where it's the worst. So these are people that have been taught, grown up, indoctrinated, whatever you want to say, with a specific ideal set. So what we're talking about today, I think if somebody, say in some rural town in Texas or something like that hears this, they're like, well, gosh, all my neighbors and all my family, we've all been married forever, right?
Is that how they sound? Is that how they really sound?
That's probably how they sound, and I can do that because my family's from the South. But you know, but the thing is that they have grown up in a completely different environment that has taught them to stay together, to, you know, and I mean, you look at a lot of cultures, the parents raise the kids stay there, and they might kind of move around a little bit, but the kids stay close by because now they're going to raise their parents at their end of life stages, right? So in the United States, we don't do that kids move halfway across the country. Bye, mom and dad. I don't care about you anymore, kind of thing. So if we're doing that with our parents, how are we treating our spouses? So
Right.
there's a lot that has culturally changed, I believe, over time. So it's
No,
really
you're
made a
right.
difference.
You're right. And I think going back to what Lizzie said about how we are express ourselves or lack thereof, I think we're wired, right? We're wired to be that way. Um, and let me tell you why. Because I'm sure growing up, your dad, Jay, and then you and mine, growing up, you fall and scuff your knee. They're like, get up, don't cry, you're fine. Nothing, your guts ain't coming out, you're fine. It's just a scratch, right? And then,
Yeah.
I did that with my boys. They hurt themselves, they busted their lips or something. You're fine, nothing's happening, you're going to survive, right? So we kind of indoctrinate our children to like, hey,
Right.
or our boys at least, right? Hey, you're fine. Suck it up. Nothing. Don't let them see you cry. Don't let them. Blah blah blah. My little girl, though, our daughters, we protect them. We hug them if they're crying. We don't want to see them cry, and we go, "You're okay." And we even get into our little baby voices with them, and we treat them differently, right? So this is something that's to going back to what Lizzie said. Lizzie, this is something that's wired in us, right? We treat our little girls different when we raise them. We don't treat them like we raise our boys. If they fall, we don't tell our little girls, "Suck it up, you're fine, nothing's gonna happen to you." We're like, "Oh my God, my little baby, are you okay, honey? Blah blah, don't cry," and kiss them and all kinds of things. The boys are like, "Ah, you're fine." Pop, swap them in the butt, like, "Get going, boy. Get on that bike. You're good." Right? But it is. I think it is something that's wired in us. It is something that we just, you know, men are men, Lizzie. Men are men, and I think that's how we wire our children to be the same way. And in turn, when they have children, they're going to do the same thing to them, and hopefully they break that cycle. Hopefully they understand, hey, it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to talk about things and not just let it be. I think my boys have a better grasp at that than I ever did. Only because, like Jay said, we're living in a different society, right? Everything's changed, whether for the best or not. Everything has changed. Women are clearly at a different level than they were 15, 20 years ago. Um, the workforce has kind of changed as well. So we're seeing things that we haven't seen before. Even on the negative side, we're seeing things that we've never seen before, things we've never dealt with before, right? So with all that, people have to adapt, people have to change, people have to fit in society. And these are the things that are happening. Everybody's starting to be a little bit more emotional or express themselves a little bit differently or even care to show that something bothers them, right? Where before in our time, like something bothers us, we're like, he's an idiot, walked away, right? Now we're sitting there like, hey, that really offended me. Hey, that really bothered me, right? And then we go to our workplace, right? We have diversity and inclusion, and we talk about feelings, talk about emotion. I mean, it's something that's really being programmed out there to everybody. So I kind of see what Lizzie's talking about. That it's in what you're talking about, Jake. That things are changing, right? Where our environments are changing. We're starting to adapt more to these changes. Um, Maybe it's just us, old dogs. You know what I mean, Jay? I mean, we are who we are, bro. I don't know if we're going to change or we're going to change how we talk. But I guess our only hope is that our children and then their children are able to even express themselves even more and be more equal to women when it comes to expressing our emotions. And maybe that would help us in our suicide rates, right? And our rates of harming each other, things like that, to ourselves, maybe that will start to drop. Maybe we'll see less mental health issues. Maybe there'll be a big difference. And we can only hope for the best, right? In seeing that by people being able to express themselves and not just keep it in like men do now. Maybe by expressing their feelings to a significant other. Maybe in the future, being manly is going to your best friend and say, "Hey, brother, I'm going through some hard times right now, man. I don't know. What do you think? How should I treat this? How should I do this? Should I, and then in turn, our brother's telling us, "Hey, seek some help, or I'll go with you. Let's see what we can do." Maybe that's the answer. Maybe not today, but maybe here soon, right? I don't know, Lizzie. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's where we're going. And, as I do sometimes, forgive me, I'll get a little cosmological on you, but we really are going through a huge shift in a time of changing ages. Scripture talked about this time. Many ancient cultures have talked about this time right now that we're in. And so to kind of reframe the 70% of divorces being initiated by women, I believe it's reflective of the time change that we're in, meaning people are waking up and going, wait a minute, we don't have to be bonded because you're the one that helps out on the farm. We don't have to be bonded because we have 12 children and, we're just
Wow.
changing, right? Well, farmers loved all
Mormons,
the children, right? They could help
Yeah.
out with things.
Yeah.
But,
Mormon farmers.
um, right. Or we don't have to be, bonded because of our traumas or because, we're really learning a lot more about like waking up going, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, and plus, we live past 55. When people stayed together for their
Mm.
whole life, they weren't living till like, 50. Maybe some of us could have done that.
Yeah. 20 to 55, I could handle that.
Right. Living to like 84 with the same person, I'm not sure. But, and just different kind of influx of energy. And so there really is a change. And I think that divorce rate or just women, maybe you spoke to why it's mostly women that initiate that change. I don't know, but it's just reflective of what's really happening around us, even for us to be having this conversation, even for a man to speak out and go, hey, I would just love to have a place to say all the things that you just said, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and, then there's the other, things going on, even in our health and our environment. I've even heard about lower testosterone levels, like on a collective level,
Mhm.
and so what is that doing to change our relationships, and again, not saying a fault, but just how is that changing how we see each other, how we see the manly man, or what we, women tend to project onto men that doesn't give you much of a chance to express something different. So I guess my question is what we do, and I kind of left you guys with that question too. Women are used to sitting in circles and saying, hey, what are you going through this week, whether it's a coffee clutch, or a gossip circle or whatever. I'm not sure that's a men's activity, but we would make a circle for you if it's ready. But what would that be? What would your outlet be? And it might not be anything women do. It could just be opening the conversation, but what would be the different thing that isn't, going to the bar and having a couple beers and watching the game, you
Well,
know?
there's 90% of it there, Lizzie. You just ruined. Well,
Right.
I think that's a good question, Jay. I think she really, man, she really knows how to ask these hard questions, huh?
And there might
Yeah.
not be an answer yet. It might just be, hey, let's just sit down, together and have a chat, and maybe it's a part of a practice. Meaning, if there's a few women that have a heart for this and are open to listening to whatever, well, let's go talk with them and just, it doesn't have to be about
Right.
anything. Just having that experience of nobody's, put a label on or read or judged in a certain way because we talked about something that wasn't, normal.
Well, I think it's conversations just like this that really will make the difference over time. You I don't remember, the conversation was in there somewhere when we were talking about the diversity and inclusion HR managers, right? So there's big companies that have a specific manager that is just, that's all they do, to make sure that all the diversity and inclusion is there, and that they talk to people that don't talk to other people, right, and all that. And I don't agree with that. I really don't. I think anytime you make mandates, you have the government. The government is horrible at everything they do. Everything, right? The farther it gets away from the people being able to basically vote in and dictate what the government, our representatives, do for us, the more they start moving away from that, and they just start doing everything willy-nilly on their own. They screw everything up, right? There's a reason that they outsource making tanks and space shuttles, because they would screw that up. That's why they outsource it, right? And they outsource everything. So, the fact that this is becoming kind of mandated into businesses where they have to have these people and stuff like that, I don't think it's the right direction. I really don't. I don't think it's the right way. You're forcing a whole emotional thing. I mean, we've seen it in the media so much with schools. Parents are trying to fight against what their kids are being taught. In one generation, you can't completely, turn the ship around and go a different direction. It's just not that way. And if you, it's funny, I've seen some like videos and memes and stuff of these girls. They're like, I want to go back to when I didn't work and when my husband was the head of the house and all this. I don't want to work anymore. And the thing is that stuff gets, so the media, since the beginning of time, right, however they got the information out there, has been twisted and turned. So in this country, they had a thing called the women's suffrage, right? So where women couldn't vote and all this kind of stuff. Um, at that time, most of the women. Now, I'm not saying that just like everything else in the world, there wasn't some guys that were pigs to their wives and stuff like that, and they didn't deserve to hang from a tree somewhere. But the thing is that people don't understand at that time why things were done the way they were. Well, why couldn't women vote? Well, there was a couple different reasons for that. One is that we have just been talking about it, that the man was the head of the household, and that vote was for the household, right? You're both going to vote Republican or Democrat or Whig Party or whatever it was at the time. So why are you just going to do, instead of having 100 Democrat votes, you're going to have 200 because you got all these, the separate votes. Here was the biggest reason for it, and this never gets talked about. That person that is in office, right, gets to decide if you go to war. And who goes to war? The men do. And so that representative is going to send you off to war to die, not the woman. So why would the woman vote for the representative that is going to send the man off to die? Now, things have changed, and obviously I totally agree with women voting now, but the way it was done was through the government's interaction, which it shouldn't have been done that way. It should have been through the people pushing for that legislation better than it was, right? So those kind of things, and again, that was phrased where you have a bunch of sexist men and racist people, just like nowadays, all that stuff's thrown around so much. And I think that is the stigmas that have been created through time, and still to this day, there's this stigma that all men are, sexist towards women, and that is so far from the truth. I mean, every single, Joe's sitting right there, I'm sitting right here. You couldn't, I mean, you can do anything to our, females in our family that we wouldn't be completely enraged over, right? And so, I mean, we love the women in our lives, and they're, cherished
We
beyond
love women, period.
imagination. All right, don't go down that road.
Well, and I attest to that.
Yeah,
I'm in a room with you guys on a regular and the band and all that. I don't have men around me that, are
that
just sexist and, you know, in that frame of mind. So I know that that's not true.
no, it's and what's funny, Lizzie, is talking about that. We've had like colorful discussions, right? Stuff that kind of gets like, and exactly what we're doing right now. What do? We laugh, and I think that's one of the. If I was to say something, I think the world has got too dang serious. People take everything too serious. They get offended over everything because they're being too serious. Nobody laughs anymore. The fact that we are going after comedians in this world, going after comedians for saying something that offends somebody, really puts the icing on it and tells you exactly where we're at as a society. And we need to stop
We're
that.
weak as a
We need-
society. Yeah,
Well, go ahead, Jay.
no, I was just
oh
saying
no,
that
that
we are weak in our society. That has changed a lot. So.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And again, I'll go back to the age is changing. And I'll point it out again, stepping back from the picture of kind of what's happening right now. But what we've come from is an age of exactly what we're seeing the extreme of, the hive mind. The one that says we all must act a certain way and do a certain thing and believe a certain way. And that's, part of the HR department still attempting to get us to all be a certain, not offend a certain way, not call a person a certain thing. Oh my God, is it a he, she, they? I don't know. But they're still trying to keep us in this hive mind. But I hate to tell you, or them, that that's just not that we're coming out of that age. And this speaks to what I'm kind of giving a call to action here to all of us in this bridge, because it really speaks to the age we're going into. And I won't even talk about the astrological wheel, but we come from one age to the next. And that last age is about, let's all join a thing, follow the leader, whatever that is, politics, country, religion, guru, whatever you want to do. And we're coming into an age where it's really about actually what scripture was saying: know thyself, go within yourself and know who you are, know where your God self resides within you. And that means know yourself individuated from the label, right? The thing that says, I'm a this, I'm a that, you know. And if you know yourself well enough, then we even get out of like trying to tell people who we're not. I'm not that way. I'm not. We can just go, no, this is who I am. And if the woman, the female, the partner can come to us and go, okay, great, this is who I am because I've individuated, I know myself well enough, then the understanding is there from the get-go, right? We're already not playing a game based on labels. So it's kind of a call to action to question all these labels, question all the things that we say we can or can't do, can or can't say, ways we can or can't behave, and just question that. Be courageous enough to say, you know what, that's actually not true. I actually can express. I do have a place to talk. I can have these conversations or act in a way that isn't accepted by the dudes. Try it out, right? And then we become more individuated and say, hey, maybe that works for you, but this is what works for me. And then we can really start, then I can speak to that. Then I can try to understand that. We can start understanding each other and give each other space to do that and be whatever your expression is. That's, I don't know, any other, it is, it's also just, like I said, stepping back from the picture, the age we're coming out of, that let's join everybody and be like everybody. Because, gosh, you're like, okay, well, if I do all that, I can't breathe, I can't move, I can't eat because, God, I'm going to, kill a bug, or something if I do any of this. Because,
right.
Where does that end? Instead of like, well, this is how I relate and go from there, right? So anyway.
True. So
How
I
do you guys?
think, real quick, I think before I hand it over to you, Jay, one thing I do want to say is that if I could go back, I wish I would have done a little bit of things, treated all my kids the same, right? Not the boys like boys and my daughter like a daughter. One thing I did do differently than my dad did was that I did tell my kids I loved them. I always, both my boys and my little girl. My dad never told me that. I mean, I knew he loved me, right? My mom, it was always my mom, right? But I knew my dad loved me. He just never told me. But I always thought to myself, how great would that be to hear that? That's part of emotion, right? So I know I did that with my boys. At least I told them that I loved them and I would kiss them, and something my dad never did, right? Because my dad was a man from Mexico, machos, and I would kiss my kids, my boys, and up until grade school, I'd kiss them, and even through high school, So and I told them I love them. So, and I think my boys now have taken it a step further because they come to me and talk to me about things that they feel or they felt, after their mom and I got a divorce and things like that. So that's why I know that they've taken it a step further, and good thing that my ex-wife and I are in excellent, great terms, that we can still talk about our children and things that affect them and what doesn't. And they're older now, they're adults, right? But they'll always be our kids, right? So I think, men, young men out there right now who have kids, love them all, right? Treat them all the same. Treat the little girls like you do the little boys like you do your little girls, and show them to express themselves, and don't want them to be all caught up in this world that who knows where it's going, right? But let's try to teach our children to express themselves a little bit better than we did in our generation. So again,
Yeah.
thank you, Lizzie. Giving very, very great insight on a woman's perspective on all this.
Thank you for allowing me. And as I'm sitting here saying this, because I know you guys have been friends for so long, and again, my call to action, like, well, let's all try expressing ourselves a little bit more, be courageous enough. And so, do you guys
Hmm.
tell each other you love each other? Right? Can we like
You know
step up and
what?
go, you know, love you,
Let me
you
say
know?
this. We do. We
We
actually do.
do, yeah.
We actually do. And
Yeah.
you thought you were
Yeah.
going to get us, didn't you?
No, well, but
Yeah.
you know, I knew you would. I knew it wouldn't be hard for you guys anyway. But you know, I
No,
think it's just the
Jason's
courage
like
to
a
express.
Jason's like a brother. We tell each other we love each other. So yeah, he's like a
Yeah.
brother. He's family. So you tell your family you love them.
Yeah, exactly. So very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, that's really important. Little boys, one of the biggest things they want is confirmation and acceptance from their dad, right? They need their dad. So the "I love you," the hug, one of the best moments that a son will ever have with their dad is when the dad comes up, puts his arm around, and says, "I'm so proud of you, son."
Yeah,
Because that is a
Yeah,
moment that it really makes a difference in that little boy's life. And the problem is that little boys are so void of fathers nowadays, of a fatherly figure, and it's hurt society, and we've seen it, and
sure have.
the places that fathers are missing the most is where the society is hurting the most, so it's a really big deal. But thanks so much for hanging out with us today. I'm Jay, and that's Joe, and this has been Joe and Jay Outspoken. Thank you to our very special guest this week, Miss Lizzie Moon.
Thank
If
you,
you all
Lizzie.
had fun or learned anything, do us a favor, like, subscribe, comment, and share. If there's a topic you would like to see us cover in the future, let us know at joeandjproductions.com/ideas. That's how Lizzie got a hold of us. So if you would like to help the cause, it can be as small as liking, subscribing, commenting, and you can grab merch from the Outspoken store or become one of our Patreon members. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Take care of one another.
Do better, be better.
And as always,
God
God
bless
bless
America.
America.